What's up, guys? 3-2 yesterday. A pretty good day. Could have been 4-1 pretty easily, although maybe I also got a little bit lucky on the Toronto win, maybe. Although I don't think they're really in danger of losing the game. They were somewhat in danger, I guess, of not covering the spread. Maybe it was more that their starter, Yariel Gonzalez, is that his name? Yariel Rodriguez. I forget what his name is. Oh my God. He did not go that deep into the game. So that was the one thing that I kind of got wrong about that game. But Toronto had enough of an edge that they were still able to get that done. And then the one where I really got screwed over was, of course, the under in the first 5 innings in Miami, Atlanta. That game was 2-0 Miami into the bottom of the fifth. So all you need to do is avoid Miami, who can't hit, scoring 3 runs in the 5th inning against, I assume Chris Sale was still in the game at that point. So against a pitcher who has a pretty good track record in general and against Miami. And of course, Miami, their putrid offense actually puts up a 3 spot in the bottom of the 5th to ruin that play. Unbelievable. And then the full game wound up going under. There was only 1 more run scored throughout the remainder of the game after that. That's ridiculous. So full game under covered in that one. In the first 5 inning did not, and it was only because of 3 runs being put up in the bottom of the 5th. Disgusting. I hate that. I guess there's nothing else to say about that. I mean, the White Sox lost with Crochet yesterday, so that was the one bad loser really yesterday, the one that I did not have right. And then the under in the night game, the Cubs Mariners, that hit pretty easily, I think. Oh, and the Washington Capitals won as an underdog. So that worked out pretty well. We'll move on to today. The NHL is the first thing I looked at this morning. It's a small card, man, and I'm just not going to get involved in this. I mean, I believe you do have I think Vegas is still kind of jockeying for positioning. Like, it's possible that they've clinched a playoff spot, but I think it's possible they can get out of the wild card. So there is still reason for them to be playing if they want like a slightly better playoff position up against Colorado, who played yesterday, but Colorado got absolutely drilled yesterday. A horrific game yesterday, lost 7-0. So they might have some reason to show up in this game too because of that embarrassing performance. And I think Colorado still is also fighting for like some playoff positioning there. Other than that, I don't think there's really that much. I mean, St. Louis got eliminated, so are they going to be in the Dream Crusher? I would say possibly not because it's their final home game. And other than that, I don't think there's really much to even talk about there. NBA, I'm actually skipping the entire NBA card too. This is a tricky day, man. It's the last day of the NBA. And the situation in the NBA is such that you have in the East is way more of a cluster than the West is. In the East, you do have Milwaukee and New York, both, and Cleveland have all clinched playoff spots, but they're all still within 1 game of each other, so they could all kind of shift around there. Then there's a 2-game gap between Cleveland and Orlando, Indiana, Philadelphia, who are all in a 3-team tie right now, and one of those teams that winds up in the lowest spot is going to wind up in the play-in. So those 3 teams are obviously playing to avoid the play-in games there. And then you have Miami. They do have an outside chance at avoiding the play-in, but it's highly unlikely. It's technically possible, but I think Miami's basically, they kind of know they're kind of locked into a play-in game, and they can't fall into the lower play-in game where Chicago and Atlanta are way behind them. So that does set up a spot in the East where Atlanta has nothing to play for because they are locked into the bottom play-in game there. They know they're going to have to play 2 play-in games. And they're up against an Indiana Pacers team who obviously has a ton to play for because they're trying to avoid the play-in. Lot on the line for Indiana. But then you look at the line, and Indiana's gone up from 11.5 to a 14-point favorite. And so I'm not going to lay 14 with the Pacers, man. Even though there is a huge motivational discrepancy there. The books obviously know this. I'm not going to be able to do it. But that is the situation there. And then Cleveland, they are in a situation where they are playing against the Charlotte Hornets, so I think just got blown out in their last game by the Celtics, if I remember correctly. Hornets, I think, were coming off a win over Atlanta. Atlanta hasn't had much to play for for a few games now. And I think that was actually a game where Trae Young returned, and Atlanta somehow has been playing worse with Trae Young. And that was the reverse injured player theory spot. So I should have picked that up, and I should have played Charlotte there. I was considering possibly playing Charlotte there, but it was one of those double-digit spreads. I was just like, I don't know. Charlotte's now coming off getting blown out by the Celtics. They're playing against Cleveland. Cleveland's coming off, of course, that huge win over the Pacers. But Cleveland did clinch a playoff spot. And, well, actually, I think they can't drop down anymore. So they have guaranteed themselves a home playoff series. But now it's just a question of, are they going to still put an effort to try to move up? I think they could still move up above either the Knicks or Milwaukee. I'm not sure how the tiebreakers turn out there, but it looks like the Cavs may still have something to play for because they're still a huge double-digit favorite. But maybe that's just because the Hornets suck so bad. But the Cavs, I would probably not want to play the Cavs here because it's like they've guaranteed themselves a home playoff series. They don't have that much to gain by winning this game, really. They're just the significantly better team here. And they're coming off a big win to clinch that playoff spot. So I don't think the Cavs are in a good spot, but I just don't want to get involved in a double-digit line like that. I don't know if there's anything else to really talk about there. Magic are playing the Bucks, so that's kind of interesting. The Magic are returning home from a road trip, and the Magic probably have a little bit more to play for than the Bucks do. The Bucks have guaranteed themselves a home playoff series in the first round as well, although they probably would ideally like to stay ahead of the Knicks and the Cavs, which is where they are right now, but barely tied with the Knicks, really, but they have the tiebreaker. But the Magic are fighting to avoid that play-in, man, and they've lost a bunch of games in a row. So they pretty much can't afford to lose this game. And they did just lose at Milwaukee, and Orlando's a much better home team, but it is still also a return home spot. But you doubt that those return home distractions are going to come into play in a game like this, where Orlando has Milwaukee coming in, and Orlando really is fighting to avoid the play-in. So the lean would be to Orlando in that one, but it's not that strong, in my opinion. And then the Bulls and the Knicks. The Knicks are still fighting for playoff positioning, as I mentioned as well. And the Bulls are locked into the lower of the two play-in games, so they have nothing to play for. The Knicks, at least, are trying to the Knicks have already guaranteed themselves a home playoff series too, but they have like playoff positioning to play for as well if they care about that. I think that is it for the East, right? Moving on to the West. Oh, and the Philadelphia 76ers, they're playing today too, because every team is playing. They're playing against the Brooklyn Nets, who obviously have nothing to play for, and the Sixers have been on a complete tear, but they're a huge favorite, and there's obviously not going to be any value in laying a giant price with the 76ers. They are trying to avoid the play-in as well, so they are the only team that has motivation in that one. Moving to the West, you have a weird situation with Oklahoma City, Minnesota, and Denver all tied, and with the tiebreakers, that is the order that they come out, and if all three were to remain in a tie, it would be Oklahoma City, then Minnesota, then Denver. So Denver has actually potentially fallen into the 3 spot. I kind of doubt that's going to happen because they're probably going to win against Memphis today. So they're playing against Memphis. Oklahoma City is also a giant favorite against the Dallas Mavericks, who I think Dallas, they've basically like locked themselves into one of the, Dallas does still kind of actually have something to play for. I don't know. Maybe they don't have the tiebreaker against the Clippers because they're a game behind the LA Clippers as far as getting a home playoff series, but it's possible the Clippers have that. The Clippers must actually have that tiebreaker because the Clippers look like they're benching people because they're a home underdog against the Rockets. So I think the Clippers actually have locked themselves into the 4 seed, and Dallas may have actually locked themselves into the 5th seed because I don't know if they have the tiebreakers over New Orleans, who is behind them. I'm not really sure, but it kind of seems that way based on the way the lines are set up today. That might be the case. And then New Orleans is in the 6th spot, and they are still battling with the Phoenix Suns as far as which team is going to wind up in the play-in. It's going to be one of those 2 teams, but it's not decided yet because I think Phoenix must have the tiebreaker. So Phoenix would have to win. New Orleans would have to lose. New Orleans is not in an easy spot. They're returning home from a road trip and having to play the Lakers. And the Lakers actually have an outside shot of – well, actually, the Lakers can avoid the bottom play-in game by winning this game, basically. So that's a pretty big motivation for the Lakers as well. And I believe the Lakers – Yeah, because the Lakers, I believe they do not have the tiebreaker against either Sacramento or Golden State. I think both of those teams have the tiebreakers against LA, I believe. So LA, I think, has a lot of motivation there to stay out of the having to play 2 games in the play-in. Let me see. Yeah, they are. LA's 1-2 against Golden State, and I think they're 0-4 against Sacramento. So they don't have the tiebreaker. I think it's head-to-head matchups. They don't have the tiebreaker against either of those teams. Oh man, I'm taking way too long just to talk about NBA where I don't even have any plays. But yeah, so both of those teams have motivation there, LA and New Orleans. That's one of the key games on the board here. New Orleans, like I said, returning home from a road trip does not make that a very easy spot, although both of those teams are going to have motivation in that one. And who's the other top team there? The T-Wolves, yeah, the T-Wolves are playing the Suns, so they're in the toughest spot out of those top 3. Oklahoma City, huge favorite. Denver, huge favorite. But the T-Wolves are playing against the Suns, who are playing to get that 6th spot and avoid that last play. And so big motivation on the part of the Suns there. So that's going to be one of the other key games there. Kind of a tough game there. Both teams have reason to show up in that one. And the lines moved down on Minnesota and towards the Suns. Although I don't know if you really trust the Suns. So I don't know. They kind of express some pretty defeated body language at times and don't really have that much depth. So I don't know about that. And then in the play-in scenario in the West, you got Sacramento and Golden State both have a chance to get out of the bottom play-in game still. Like I said, they could still get out of that. Phoenix or New Orleans, at the worst, they're guaranteed the top play-in spot. But then LA, Sacramento, and Golden State, one of those teams can avoid the bottom of the play-ins, and Sacramento, if they win and LA loses and Golden State loses, they would avoid it. And then same with the Golden State. Golden State's in the same situation as Sacramento is. Basically, they would have to win and have both those teams lose, and then they would be able to avoid it. But it seems a little bit unlikely, but it's not that unlikely that LA loses to New Orleans, playing against one of the few teams that's going to be motivated today in the NBA. Sacramento, though, is probably going to win easily. They have an easy home game against Portland, where they're a huge favorite. And then Golden State's a pretty big favorite against Utah as well at home. But it seems like Golden State, Curry is dealing with some injury, Draymond Green dealing with some injury. So their lineup is definitely in flux, which otherwise I would say I kind of actually want to lay the 8 points with Golden State here because Utah obviously has nothing to play for, and Golden State has a chance to get up out of that bottom play-in spot, especially because the Lakers have a tough game there. But I think Golden State, they probably kind of know that they don't, though, because Sacramento actually holds the tiebreaker against Golden State, and Sacramento's highly likely going to win their game. So I think that hurts Golden. So that's why I don't want to play Golden State there. And it seems like they know that, and they're going to be resting players because they need Sacramento and LA to both lose to get out of that spot, I believe. Whereas Sacramento would only need to win and have LA lose. So excuse me, I got that a little bit wrong. Yeah. To avoid the play-in. So Sacramento's in a much better spot to avoid the bottom play-in. Golden State would need Sacramento to lose, which is highly unlikely. So they probably don't really have that much to play for either. So I'm not going to be on any of those NBA games. So that's the way the whole thing shakes out. Move over to Major League Baseball. I got numerous plays in baseball. I was thinking of potentially jumping on the over in the Minnesota-Detroit game because they played a doubleheader yesterday. So their bullpens are just really not in great shape. And it looks like the money is maybe moving the line towards the over there, but I don't quite trust it because it's Bailey Ober, who is a good pitcher, although he has bad stats against Detroit's hitters, but he could potentially still pitch well because overall he's a pretty good pitcher, and his stats this year have not been good, but over his career, his stats are much better than they are this year, but he does struggle against Detroit specifically. Detroit has Jack Flaherty, who I think is the worst pitcher in that matchup, and he could definitely have a bad performance at any given time, but he actually has good numbers against Minnesota's hitters. So that just keeps you off it a little bit. If it was a worse pitching matchup, I think I would probably want to come in and do that. And then what else? I do think that there are also some pretty big pitching mismatches in a couple of these other games, but I just can't quite get there because those teams are actually also big favorites, and those were, what were they? Well, Toronto, Barrios against Freeland in Colorado. I mean, that's just a mismatch in general. I just don't really want to jump in on a very heavily favored Toronto team. And Toronto did win yesterday as well. So that one is kind of out for me. And then there was one other one where I was like, oh, this is a huge mismatch, but it's like, I'm just not going to get involved in it because, Zach Wheeler, although the market actually looks to be in disagreement on that one. Zach Wheeler for Philly, much, much better pitcher than Mitch Keller. And Wheeler has good stats against Pittsburgh, and Keller's a bad against Philly. So it's a bad matchup for Pittsburgh. But the market indicators all look like they're moving reverse line movement basically against Philadelphia. And Philadelphia won kind of dramatically last night too. So that, will keep me off of that one as well. The games that I'm going to be on one of the other heavy favorites in Baltimore. And in this one, I think I'm going to lay the run line in this one, -1.5. You can get like +110 or something like that on Baltimore. This one, the market does look like it's moving the line up on Baltimore, even though they are public. They've gone up from -175 to -184. 72% of the tickets, but 76% of the cash. I like Baltimore for a lot of reasons here. Even though they're public, like I said, it does look like the money's coming in on them. So there are market indicators on the Baltimore side. And I like the scheduling situation. And I think the matchup, and I think everything about the situation here tells you that Baltimore is the side. It's just a matter of how do you want to play, how do you want to play Baltimore in this one? You could lay the -1 run line on those alternate DraftKings lines, but you got to lay like -140 on that, which similar to the Toronto one yesterday. I think that's a little bit steep, so I might not want to do that. Or you could just go straight money line and lay the like 180 or whatever with Baltimore. But that's also steep. I would probably rather lay the run line, though, in that one. I think the cheaper price on the run line is better than laying the huge money line there. But the situation we have here is Baltimore is trying to avoid a sweep, man, and they have been awful in this series against the Brewers. But if you remember, I played against Baltimore in game 1 of this series because they were returning home from a road trip and had just swept Boston on the road in a big divisional series. And I think the pitching matchup was bad for Baltimore in the first game as well, and they got smacked. And then they had a really bad game last night, too. Or yesterday. So in this series, they've been massacred by the Brewers to the tune of 22-6. They've given up 11 runs in each of these games. So I think even the public might not be on Baltimore enough here. And I think we might actually get a little bit of value on Baltimore because of those horrible, horrible games that Baltimore played. But now Baltimore is going to be in an embarrassed, like angry mood off of those 2 games. They're trying to avoid the sweep, which is a little bit of an extra motivator. And I think they absolutely have the pitching matchup edge here. You got Colin Ray pitching for Milwaukee, and I know I went against him in the last game, and I did not get that one right, but still, overall, his career stats, he is just not a very good pitcher, man. I'm sorry. 4.62 career ERA, 1.28 whip. That's a bit high. Only 236 strikeouts and 97 walks and 290 innings in his career, so only a 2.4 strikeout walk ratio. Not good. He's not a really great strikeout pitcher. He does have actually too many walks as well. Nothing to really like here, although in a small sample size, Baltimore's hitters haven't done well against him. They're 3 for 16 off of him, a 188 batting average. So that's one thing that I worry about slightly, but I just think he's clearly the worst of these 2 pitchers in this one. And his numbers this season might deceive some people as well because he only has a 1.64 ERA, so that looks good. But 1.27 whip this year kind of indicates that he's gotten away with putting some guys on base, and his ERA should probably be a little bit higher. And then, of course, Baltimore. Corbin Burns is pitching for Baltimore, man. I mean, he's got a 0.75 whip this year and a 1.93 ERA. And on the season so far, he has a 20-2 strikeout walk ratio and has only allowed 12 hits in 18 2/3. He has been really good so far in his first season with Baltimore, which I'll talk about that aspect of this as well. But he's just been on fire. And Milwaukee's hitters, because he was on Milwaukee for his career up until this season, they've almost never seen him before. They only have 2 guys in their lineup who have ever faced Burns before. And yeah, they're 2 for 6 off him. 0 extra base hits and 3 strikeouts, though, and 1 walk for a 333 batting average. But it's a very small sample size, man. And the majority of the Brewers hitters haven't ever actually faced Burns, although maybe in like practice and stuff when Burns was on their team, maybe they're kind of familiar with Burns' mechanics and how he throws. So there is that aspect of it, but he's the much better pitcher in this matchup. And I think he's going to have a little bit of extra motivation because he's facing the team that traded him away. And really, it seems like they traded him away for kind of crap. They traded him away for DL Hall, I believe, who pitched yesterday. And got lit up, and he was just not good. Even though they won that game, I think he pitched pretty badly in yesterday's game for Milwaukee. I believe he was the starter for Milwaukee yesterday, and like neither starter did well in that game at all. Yeah, Hall did not do well in that game. So, he was doing well for a little while, I guess, and then he got kind of roughed up a little bit further into the game yesterday. So Burns, I think he's going to have even kind of a little bit more to hit. Like, hey, you guys traded me for that guy. He sucked yesterday. Well, I'm going to come out and show you, basically. So I think he's got a little something to prove facing the team that traded him away for the first time. I think it might be a little bit of extra motivation on Burns' side there as well. So all that being the case, I like Baltimore in that one. Next up, I'm going to play the Houston Astros. You can get them at it looks like it's minus 120 everywhere right now. And this is a full game play. This looks like to have it has market indicators on their side as well. And I think this is a game where the pitching matchup is kind of misleading, in my opinion. Houston's got, they're down actually from minus 115 to 114 according to pregame, but I don't see anything below minus 120 right now. Maybe there's something out there, but as far as if it's minus 120, that would actually mean the line has moved up on Houston a little bit in some spots. But looking at the market percentages, you got 65% of the tickets over on Texas and 75% of the cash on Houston. I think Houston's being undervalued right now, man. They're still a good team, and they're off to a bad start this season. And Texas is off to a good start. Texas 8-7, not really that great, but they are leading the division right now. And Houston's record just looks so ugly. They're actually below Oakland in the standings right now. Houston is not worse than Oakland. I hate to say, yeah, that is not the case. Houston 5-11 to start the season. So I think we're actually going to get value on Houston in some spots, such as this one, where Houston's not really that. I mean, they might be the slightly worse team than Texas with the way that the personnel is right now. Maybe Houston might be feeling a little bit better now as well because Verlander pitched yesterday. It seems like he's about to rejoin Houston's rotation. He pitched in Double-A yesterday, I think, in the minors, and he's about to probably come back within the next week or so. So Houston might be might have a little bit of extra confidence boost because they know he's coming back too. And they won yesterday against this Rangers team, which actually I think helps. I don't think this is going to be a letdown spot because these teams have split the season series so far. They're 3-3 against each other. So this is actually going to be the rubber match. So yeah, both teams are going to be motivated here. But I think Houston has a little bit of extra reason to be motivated because they're the last place team in the division right now against the Rangers, who are the first place team. But Houston's schedule has been tough, man. Even though, yeah, they got swept by the Royals, and that shouldn't have happened. It was ugly as well. That was on the road. But other than that, they faced the Yankees, the Blue Jays, in 2 series against Texas. So their schedule has not been easy. So I think, again, we're getting a little bit of value on them, whereas Texas, they've played a difficult schedule too. They did play the Athletics at home. They lost 2 out of 3 of those too, so I don't know. Both of these teams have actually had somewhat difficult schedules, but looking at the starting pitching matchup here is kind of where you get to see there might be a hidden edge here because you have Nathan Eovaldi pitching for Texas. He is the older of these two pitchers. He's had some points in his career where he wasn't that good, man. Even earlier on in his career, he's had his numbers have kind of been all over the place, although in his last couple of years with Boston, he was pretty good. And then it seemed like he kind of figured something out. And then he was, of course, good with Texas last year. And he's off to a pretty good start this year, too. 1.45 ERA, 0.8 whip. So he does look good, but I think those numbers have to regress a little bit back to kind of his mean, especially now that he's getting a little bit older. He tends to be he's been a decent strikeout pitcher over the last couple seasons, but not the greatest. He usually tends to be around 8 strikeouts per 9 innings, I think, something like that. And he's been exceeding that slightly this season so far. He's made a couple of good starts so far, but he kind of did so against a Cubs lineup that I don't know if they're the best. Tampa's a decent team. Then in his last game, he faced Oakland, so they're obviously not a very good team. Tampa, not horrible, but Eovaldi, where I think we get the edge is you look at both of these pitchers have huge sample sizes against the opposing hitters here. Eovaldi, Houston's hitters are 46 for 46 for 157 off of him with 10 doubles, 12 home runs, and 16 walks and 34 strikeouts. That's a ton of walks, a ton of extra base hits, and that's a 293 batting average and 942 OPS. So Eovaldi has really not done well in his history against these Houston hitters. So that's where I think we get the hidden edge here. And he's up against Javier, Christian Javier, who also has good stats this year so far, 1.1 ERA, 1.16 whip. So both these guys have pitched well so far this year, but Javier is the younger of the two pitchers and kind of more close to being in his prime, I would say. He wasn't really that good last year, though, but his first full season the year before that, he was much, much better. He was very unhittable. And then the season before that, where he kind of moved into the starting rotation, he was a lot better as well. So what do you take away from that? Is last year more of an indicator of what he is, or are those other seasons more of an indicator? It's hard to say. What we do know is that he does have a lot of strikeout potential. He strikes out a lot of guys, and that was a little bit down last year. And he's always been wild, and his walk numbers are a little bit up last year, and they're up this year too. So that's the worst thing about Javier is that his walk numbers are way too high. He's walked 9 guys this year in 16 1/3, so that's bad. But he's been tough to hit too, only allowing 10 hits and only allowing 2 earned runs, and he does have 13 strikeouts, which is decent. And he's faced 2 pretty good lineups in the Yankees and Toronto, and actually didn't do badly. He gave up 0 runs in both of those games, although he walked too many in the Toronto game. He actually did better against the Yankees, but I like Javier better, man, in general, just because he's the younger guy and because of the track record against these specific hitters. I think it's just like a matchup thing. Texas's hitters are 26 for 122 off of him lifetime. Yeah, they do have 5 home runs, 6 doubles, so 11 extra base hits, still 14 walks and 37 strikeouts. So the walk numbers aren't good, but they only have a 213 batting average off of him and a 679 OPS. So Javier's numbers against Texas's hitters are way, way better than Eovaldi's are against Houston. So you're getting the guy that might have the hidden matchup edge here in Javier, because against these specific hitters, you have a big sample size to work with on both sides. Javier has the much better numbers in the pretty decent sized sample size against these Texas hitters than Eovaldi does against the Houston hitters. And based on their records, I just think we're getting a cheap price here because of that. And we'll go full game on this one as well, because of you can look at what the bullpens did. Oh, I forgot to mention the bullpen situation in the Milwaukee game, which I will in a second. But you look at the bullpen situation after yesterday's game, which Houston did win. Texas actually used more of their pen than Houston did. Houston only used their pen for about 50 pitches worth, and Texas had to use theirs for 70-something. So I think at worst for Houston, it's kind of like a wash out of the bullpens, I would say. So I don't think either team has that much of a bullpen edge, although you have to kind of look at which team actually has the better bullpen, but then gets into who the specific pitchers are. I just don't dig that deep. I kind of go old school, look at the strikeout walk numbers and stuff like that. Look at the numbers against these specific hitters for the starters, and that's what I like to do. And it has worked out for me. So over a long period of time. So I don't know. And I think I'm up in baseball this year, although my hot streak that I had earlier ended, but I think I'm still up in baseball. So we're doing all right. And then the bullpen situation in the Baltimore game, I think, is also in favor of Baltimore. Baltimore yesterday, even though Creamer had a bad start, they kind of saved a lot of their bullpen by bringing in some of their guys for longer relief appearances, whereas Brewers had to go into their bullpen a little bit earlier, and they used 5 relievers, and Orioles only used 3. And Milwaukee used some of their better relievers, I think, too, because that game was actually close until later into the game. It was a 3-run game until Milwaukee put up 3 more in the 8th inning. So Milwaukee was actually using some of their better relievers there to try to stave off any attempt at a Baltimore comeback there. So I think the bullpen situation is also in favor of Baltimore in that one. But back to the Houston one. Yeah, Houston Astros -120. Then I'm also going to be on a total here in Washington, Oakland. I'm going to take this one over 8. I can still find an over 8 out there at -110. It looks like it's going up, though, or most of the numbers are over 8, -115 now, and some look like over 8.5 is out there, too. It looks like this line has gone down, though, and that there's cash on the under, which I don't understand that in this Washington-Oakland game here. That Oakland is kind of a pitcher-friendly park, sure, but this pitching matchup, I think, is, I'll tell you about it in a minute. I think it makes sense to take an over in this one, Washington, Oakland, even though I like to say these interleague games usually feature a lot of pitching matchups where the pitchers are unfamiliar to the opposing hitters, and usually that kind of lends itself more towards playing unders in these matchups. And I don't even think I've played an over yet in baseball. I think I've played only unders for the totals, and they've done pretty well. My unders have done pretty well. Call me the Undertaker, baby. But this one, I'm actually going to go over here, and I actually think that it's a decent spot to do so. It looks like the line has actually gone down from 8.5 juice to the over at -115 down to 8 juice at -115. And with 71% of the tickets and 77% of the cash on the under, I just don't get it, man. I'm sorry. I don't understand any of that because looking at yesterday's game was a really low-scoring game. Washington won 3-1. The game before that was 2-1 between these two teams. And then Oakland played a 1-0 game to finish the series against Texas. So they've been playing a ton of low-scoring games today. I think it's going to give us value playing an over in this one. And both of the games in this series have been low scoring. Then Washington's game prior to this was a 7-1 game against the Giants, which is also fairly low scoring. That one probably went under whatever the total was there, or maybe pushed or whatever. But now because of that, I think we are getting some value with a total that looks too low to me, given this pitching matchup, man. Although it is taking into account the fact that these offenses suck, but we can get into that in a second. But the Nationals also burned out a lot of their bullpen yesterday after Gore had a good start with 11 strikeouts, but he threw too many pitches, and they took him out after 5. And then they had to use a bunch of relievers. They used 5 relievers, basically their top 5 relievers pretty much. They used all of them yesterday. Washington did. And Oakland kind of saved a little bit of their bullpen with using Muller for 3 innings to try to get them to the end there. And then they did use the back end of their bullpen there for only 2 short stints there, 6 pitches and 7 pitches, McFarland and Kelly. So those guys actually might still be available in this game today, but I am not sure that I care that much. I don't think the bullpens are really in a great situation. I don't think Oakland's bullpen is that good anyway. And Washington's has been really burned out. And then you just look at the starting pitching matchup, and that's where I think you also get the edge here. Trevor Williams for Washington. Yeah, his stats look pretty good so far this year, right? 2.61 ERA, 1.06 whip. Hey, that's pretty good. Oh, but his career stats, 4.46 ERA and 1.38 whip. That's not good. And 708 strikeouts and 870 innings pitched. Not a good strikeout rate. 289 walks, a 2.4 strikeout walk ratio. That's not good. His overall stats aren't good. So I think his starts this year so far are just misleading. And he hasn't gone deep into games either, really. He's only gone 5 1/3 and 5 innings in each of these games. And he has only 7 strikeouts and 5 walks. So he's kept the hits down so far, but he's been walking a lot of guys, which I don't like. And then to put it over the top, his career against these A's hitters. So you talk about how bad these hitters are, but this might be a spot where the hitters actually are primed to actually be able to hit these pitchers. The A's hitters are actually 11 for 20 off of Williams' lifetime. 550 opponent batting average, 2 walks, and he only has 1 strikeout against them. 4 home runs allowed and 3 doubles. He's been really knocked around. A 1.891 OPS, a 1,891 OPS. Terrible. His stats are terrible, although granted, 2 of those hits were from Alex Wood, the pitcher that he's up against in this game. Wood is actually 2 for 2 off of Williams, a pitcher, so he's not going to be hitting in this game unless Oakland wants to really do something hilarious here. But even so, you take him out of the equation, you're still looking at 9 for 18. You're still looking at a 500 opponent batting average from these hitters. So Williams, his stats this year are misleading. He's not as good as his stats look. And then Wood's stats are actually worse. His stats this year make him look worse than he actually is, with an 8.03 ERA and 1.95 whip. But he looks like he's been sliding, man. Like basically since back when he was on the Dodgers, since starting in 2019 when he was with the Reds for a little while. His stats have been awful every one of those seasons, basically, except for 2021. He had a pretty good season with the Giants. Other than that, his stats have really not been good at all. So in the last, I think if you look at his career, his numbers are actually going to look better than they actually should be as well at this point in his career, because he's now in his 30s, and his last like several seasons now, if you just take them as a sample size and throw away the earlier seasons, although even in some of those seasons his whip was too high, but take his like most recent seasons, his stats really don't look good. His stats this year, as I mentioned, are terrible. He does have 12 strikeouts and 12 and a third, which is not bad, but he's given up 11 earned runs, only on 1 home run, 18 hits and 6 walks. He has been struggling, man, although he's faced some pretty good lineups, some pretty good teams so far, some pretty good offenses. But against Washington's hitters, they're 16 for 42 off them lifetime with 2 doubles, 4 home runs, and he does have a 7-to-1 strikeout walk ratio against them, but that's still a 381 opponent batting average and a 1.110 OPS, 1,110 OPS. So his stats are awful against these starters. So both of these, against these hitters, I mean, both of these starting pitchers have terrible numbers against the opposing lineup. So I'm just going to take a swing there and throw it on the over in that one. I think it dictates it. I think that those what I just laid out there dictates a play on the over. And then finally, to finish this out, a fourth baseball play. Yeah, I got all 4 of my plays there in baseball. I'm going to play on an undervalued underdog. I think, again, the pitching matchup is misleading here, and that's going to be on the San Diego Padres. So this number is really plummeting. You can still get them at like plus 140, but it looks like the market indicators are really strong on the Padres. The numbers moved down from LA, the Dodgers, minus 170, down all the way to minus 143. Of course, the public is going to be on the Dodgers. I believe they're in first place. Everybody knows the name, the Dodgers, the offseason moves that they made. They're in first place in this division. They have a decent padding. They also won yesterday against the Padres, but they're obviously going to be the public team. They have 75% of the tickets on them. 56% of the cash, however, over on the other side on San Diego, and there's reverse line movement coming in strongly. It looks like moving the line down on the Dodgers. You can still get San Diego at a nice money line underdog price here, and I think that the matchup looks pretty good for the San Diego Padres in this one. You do have the Dodgers yesterday in that win for the Dodgers. There was a brawl. I think there was a brawl in this game and in the Orioles Brewers game. So I'm playing on 2 teams that were involved in brawls. Yeah, 2 matchups that involved brawls yesterday. But yesterday, both of these teams used 3 relievers, but I think that I would say that the Dodgers had to use their better relievers to some extent because they had the lead and they were trying to hold on to the lead at the end. So they brought in a couple of the back end of their pen. They used their closer yesterday. I don't know who the Padres closer actually is, but the Padres may have used some of their not as good relievers yesterday. So the Dodgers, I think their bullpen situation is a little bit worse coming into this game because they used a couple of their better relievers over what San Diego did yesterday because the Dodgers were winning the game late in the game and had to hold off the Padres. So there is that aspect of it. But of course, yeah, as I mentioned, the public is only going to be on the Dodgers in this one. The team with the better record, they're always a public team. Everybody knows that. And the public's going to look at the starting pitching matchup and think, hey, like this looks also pretty good for the Dodgers, right? James Paxton is pitching. He's got a 1.64 ERA and a 1.18 whip this season. Yeah, but he also did that against the San Francisco Giants and the Minnesota Twins, who aren't really known for being great offensively right now. In 11 innings pitched, he has 9 strikeouts and 6 walks, so that's really not that good. 6 walks is not very good. That strikeout walk ratio is pretty bad. He's only allowed 2 earned runs, which is pretty good, and only 7 hits, which is pretty good. But Paxton, I mean, as I mentioned, I think I went against him in his last game, and he did well against the Twins, unfortunately for me. But he's been starting to struggle a little bit, man. Last year was his first, like, anything close to a full season since 2019 when he was with the Yankees, and then his whip was starting to slip a little bit from what it had been the couple of prior years. His whip actually hasn't been that great over his entire career. It's 1.22, but he had a couple of good years to finish his stint with Seattle, and then he was a lot worse with the Yankees. Then he was back on Seattle very briefly, and since the Yankees in 2019, where he had a full season and put up decent numbers and really good strikeout numbers, but a 1.28 whip, which wasn't very good. Since then, he had not really had much, like, he didn't really do anything in the majors. He only made 5 starts in 2020, 1 in 2021, didn't pitch at all in 2022 in the majors, then came back for the Red Sox last year, my Red Sox, and wasn't great. 4.5 ERA last year and 1.31 whip. So he might be nearing like the end of his career, man, at this point. So I think his numbers make him, and his name and the weight that it carries from back in his Seattle days all kind of like make him overvalued a bit here. And what he's done this year so far, which is what I meant by his numbers this season. I think he's going to have to regress a little bit here, especially when he's putting up walk numbers like this. And then you look at his numbers against the Padres hitters. Only like 7 of them have seen him before, 6 of them, but some of their best hitters have seen him before, and they are 20 for 57 off him. So that's still not a small sample size. It's the majority of their starting hitters, I would say, have seen him before, to the tune of 20 for 57, 5 doubles, 4 home runs, a triple, 10 RBIs, and he does have an 11-2 strikeout walk ratio against them, but a 351 opponent batting average and 1.057, 1,057 OPS. So these Padres hitters have really gotten to James Paxton. They've been able to hit him quite well. They've knocked him around. So I think you don't actually get the edge on James Paxton here, even though his numbers this season are better than Darvish's are, or they look better. Darvish with a 3.86 ERA, which isn't too bad. A 1.29 whip, that's not great. Darvish has also faced the Giants this year and did pretty well. He opened the season pitching against this Dodgers team and got knocked out of the game early, but he didn't allow any runs in the game, but he did walk 3 guys, which wasn't great. And he wound up being taken out of the game early for whatever reason. So I think he's going to want to kind of like bounce back from that. And he had a bad game in his most recent start against the Cubs, where he got knocked out of that game and he walked too many hitters in that game. I think he's going to want to bounce back from those. Other than those 2 games, he's had a 13-2 strikeout walk ratio in the other 2 games, although that was against San Francisco and St. Louis. But still, overall, he has a 20-8 strikeout walk ratio, which isn't horrible. The 20 strikeouts is good, and 18 2/3. The 8 walks is too high, but he's only allowed 16 hits, and 8 earned runs, maybe a little bit too high, but he hasn't been that bad this year. It's Yu Darvish, man, even though he is also even older than James Paxton. Actually, I don't consider him to have had as much of a steep drop off in his career. His career numbers are just kind of like, they are what they are. And he didn't miss like entire seasons like that either. Even the last year's season, he was kind of similar to what Paxton's was, where he took a step back. But the couple of seasons before that, he was significantly better. And his stats against these Dodgers hitters are what puts this over the edge for me. They have a lot of history against them, and Darvish has had the best of it. 39 for 192 for a 203 batting average, 57 strikeouts, 21 walks. So still too many walks. I mean, Darvish just kind of always had too many walks. And 8 home runs, 1 triple, and 7 doubles. But in a lot of at bats, only a 203 opponent batting average and 657 OPS. So Darvish has had the better of the Dodgers hitters here than Paxton has. Darvish has a much better track record against the Dodgers hitters than Paxton does against San Diego. And I think San Diego might have a little bit of extra motivation here just because they're behind the Dodgers. The Dodgers have some nice padding to start the season here in this division, although this is the rubber match and it is at home for the Dodgers. But San Diego, behind them in the standings. So that's going to do it, man. And the market read looks strong in San Diego as well. So those plays, again, all in baseball. Baltimore, I guess we could say it's going to be the Baltimore run line. I should probably jump in on that. Baltimore Orioles -1.5 runs at +110. Houston Astros money line. These are all full game plays. -120. Washington and Oakland over 8 runs. And San Diego Padres +140. Let's get it done. Peace.